Hey kids, did you miss me? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. I am back with a vengeance. The first thing I have to do is severely apologize to everybody for my absence for a couple of weeks. After my Super Bowl video, I got home from my Super Bowl party. I was sick for a little while. We had Valentine's Day that went by, and you know, I just I let life get the better of me for a little bit. But anyways, I am back now. I hope you enjoyed the Kid Rock lyrics at the beginning there. I thought it was relatively apropos. And we are back, and this is what we're going to be talking about in this video. For the last little while, I have been dedicating my entire life basically to playing UFC Undisputed 3. And I thought what I would do is I would come on video and give you guys my impressions, my review, if you will, of UFC Undisputed 3. So here we go. Basically, the way that I looked at it was I broke it down into 5 basic categories. Stuff that I hated, stuff that I disliked, stuff that was so-so, stuff that I really liked, and stuff that I loved about this game. The list is a little top-heavy. I got to admit, I'm pretty impressed with the overall presentation of UFC Undisputed 3. I think it's a significant step up from Undisputed 2010, but that might be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So what we'll do is we'll start at the bottom, and I want to talk about a couple of things that I absolutely hated about the game, and a couple of things that I just, you know, showed a strong dislike for. The main thing about the game that I absolutely hated was the load times. The load times were just atrocious in this game, and the fact that it's a third generation game, like it's the kind of load times you would expect from like first gen PS1 games. But I mean, we're not in first gen anymore. We're in the third generation of these video game systems, and just the fact that the load time is so high, especially when you're starting the game. Starting the game, that shit's the worst. It's just terrible. When you're first starting the game, I mean, there's just, the load times are just way too much. It takes you like 20 minutes to start your game. That's got to be the main thing about the game that I really hate. And it sucks because I turn the game off and on every day, basically, including today, doing my research to finish up doing this review. Going along with that, something that I really didn't like this year was the creative fighter. You know, the creative fighter, they didn't improve it a ton from last year, and the few improvements that they may have made are completely overshadowed by the fact that when you create a fighter through the creative fighter mode and don't do it through career, which career mode we're going to get to in a little bit, but when you don't do it through career, your fighter is completely gimped. Completely gimped. And it's a big deal for me because that's something that I really like to do when I get a game like this, or a wrestling game, or a fighting game that has a creative fighter. You know, I like creating a lot of fighters. I like creating a whole roster, you know, and to sim fights between these fighters, or to download fighters if you have content sharing, which UFC Undisputed 3 does, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later too. But like, I really like creating fighters, and your created fighters in this game are gimped. I don't think you can get the rating above, I think, 76 overall. So your created fighter going through the creative fighter mode is going to be one of two things. He's either going to be gimpy or he's going to be completely one-dimensional. And neither one of those things are good. I'm not asking to go into the creative fighter and create Shogun Hua, or create Fedor, or create Chuck Liddell. That's not what I'm asking. But what I am asking is the ability to go in, create a fighter that's capable of beating Mark Hunt. That's what I'm asking for, and I don't think that's asking too much from my UFC fighting game. So I'm not a huge fan of the Creative Fighter, even though I'm using it an awful lot. Another thing I'm not a huge fan of is the soundtrack, and I pretty much knew that I wasn't going to be a big fan of the soundtrack. It's not that it's bad, it's just underwhelming to me. I don't think it's very good. In today's era of sports games, there's games that are done by EA that the soundtracks on them are just better. Like, they're using actual real recognizable songs to people, whereas the UFC games, both games, 2010 and this one, they're using fairly original music, yes, but it's nothing that it doesn't capture it for me. It doesn't capture the mood like, say, a Rise Against song would, or the Rise Against is just an example, but to me the soundtrack just doesn't capture what I need it to capture for a sports game, a fighting game in 2012. So the soundtrack just doesn't, to me, it doesn't work for me. It does work for some other people, I'm sure. It doesn't particularly work for me. And the only other thing that I really disliked about the game is there's too much shit in the shop. Oh, by the way, actually, I should say about the Creative Fighter. UFC has very cleverly come up with a bit of a counter to this through the cats. Is on PlayStation Store and on Xbox Live Store, you can purchase a boost pack to give your created fighters more points, and that, to me, of course, is just a cheap tactic to get more money. And I patently refuse to buy into it. So that's what they've done to sort of counteract that. It seems to me they could have just done that originally, but then they wouldn't have made more money that way. So, anyways, that's my gripe with the Creative Fighter. Yeah, there's too much shit in the shops. Things like UFC and Pride cutscenes, they're really cool to the hardcore fans, but beginners and people just getting acquainted with UFC don't have other avenues to get that shit. Like, I mean, it's not something that needs to be included in your game. And I'm sure that it's stuff like that and holding storage for the kind of thing that contributes to why the game takes so fucking long to load. And, I mean, if you could have taken the ability to buy cutscenes completely out of the game, and made it load twice as fast, I am all for that, for sure. But the shops are way too big. There's too much in terms of clothing and everything to buy. I just think, just as a whole, the shops in the game are way too big. And again, UFC cleverly counters this by giving you shop points simply for watching a fight. If you watch a simmed fight, you get 200 shop points. And you use that towards buying all the crap that's in the shop. So, I mean, UFC, obviously, very smart marketing, very smart in putting their game together in most respects. So they knew that these sort of things were going to come up, and they came up with counters to them. I just don't think that the counters were quite good enough. Let's start getting a little more positive now. The things, to me, that are kind of so-so. They introduced in the game this year the ability to make highlight reels. Kind of a cool concept. My beef with it, I guess, is that it takes up so much damn space on your hard drive, or it takes up so much storage space, because when the game starts, it's automatically saving highlight data from every single fight that you do in career mode, exhibition, whatever. So it's saving all this stuff on your storage drive, and it can end up taking up a lot of space if you're playing the game for a long time. I turned it off automatically just like right away when I opened it up, it said, we do this for highlight reels. I was like, nope. Just because it takes up a lot of space. But the highlight reels are a cool concept, so if I did want to make a highlight reel, I might turn it on for a little bit, do some fights where I try some real kick-ass crazy shit, and then turn it right back off. So highlight reels, it's kind of a cool concept. I don't think it's quite well done enough, but it's a cool concept, so it was so-so for me. And then there's career mode. The career mode this year, I think you can fight a maximum of 45 fights. In the career mode, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think it's 45 fights. Between WFA, UFC, and Pride tournaments, if you get invited to them. It's okay. It's more difficult. I will say that. I don't think the game, alienates new... it doesn't alienate people that are new to the sport because, of course, you want to keep the sport growing. But the learning curve is much steeper for Undisputed 3 as opposed to Undisputed 2010. And the career mode, the difficulty in career mode is notched up. In career mode and everything else is notched up. I'm not 100% sure if I guess I prefer the way that career mode deals with building your career fighter. I like it better in this game than I did in the last game. The last game, it was so easy to exploit that even me, who's not a very good gamer, was able to exploit it. So, this year, it's a little harder to do that. The game definitely favors balance, and it tries to keep your character balanced and tries to keep him humble when you're building, which is a grinding thing that could very well be frustrating to a lot of, especially, again, I'll use this term, casual fans. Could be very frustrating to them, but it doesn't make it a bad thing because it's a challenge, and that's good because that will keep people coming back to the career mode, is the challenge in it. So it's not a bad thing. I just thought it was, the career mode was average, but I really do like the fact that you can have the opportunity anyways to enter into Pride tournaments. I really do like that. Okay, let's get to the stuff that I like. And like I said, this is top heavy, but that's okay. Get to the stuff that I like. The tutorial, right at the beginning of the game, awesome. The fact that it gives you the option, it says, if you're new at this, do this tutorial. And you go through, you do the tutorial, there's a lot of steps in it. Your tutorial will probably run you about an hour or a little bit more. At the end of the road, they give you 3,000 shop points, which is exactly enough to buy a fighter that's available in the shop. I think it's you can either buy Chuck Liddell, Heath Herring for some reason, Dan Severn, or Mark Coleman. So, I mean, obviously I bought Chuck Liddell, and I think that's going to be everybody's first choice. I have everything in all four of the fighters in the shop now. But I just think it was such a smart move, given the fact that, okay, we have ratcheted the difficulty up, let's toss the tutorial right at the beginning of the game, so these guys know exactly, especially the newer gamers, know exactly what they're getting into. I thought that was really smart. Your choice in grappling controls, pro versus amateur, the game doesn't just stick you in and say, here's your grappling controls, learn them, deal with it. It gives you the option to do pro or amateur. And yes, there's penalties, basically, for doing amateur. But at the same time, if you're not a great fighter on the ground, using the amateur controls definitely be a big help for you, especially, and again, if you're a casual gamer or a casual fan of MMA, the amateur controls are very helpful. I don't use them. I use pro because I'm comfortable ground fighting, but some fighters aren't. Find it a lot easier to use the amateur controls, and that's cool. And that was big of UFC to include it. And content sharing. Thank God, content sharing, because that was one thing that I always thought EA MMA had over UFC 2010, is that you had EA MMA and you had a whole community doing content sharing, using EA's servers, and you could make these UFC stars that weren't in the game until the patch came through and you couldn't. You could share your own fighters and everything like that, and it was such a cool and such a huge part of EA MMA was the sharing community, and I'm so glad that Undisputed 3 ripped it off and put it into their game. I was so happy to see that, and I've downloaded a couple of the content shares. Some of the fighter builds aren't very good, but that's cool too, because you got to look for the best builds. Like, if you really badly want Fedor in this game, you gotta look for the best Fedor build. Although they have taken the Last Emperor nickname out of the game, but you gotta look for the absolute best Fedor build, because you don't want Fedor to be gimpy. But content sharing, awesome. Now, let's go to the things about the game that I absolutely loved. And the major thing about this, the one thing that I really want to highlight, the vastly improved fight AI, as well as fewer knockouts. I'm sure most of you out there who played Undisputed 3 knew and hated when the game basically devolved into a kickboxing game. On a lot of the difficulty levels, it was basically just a kickboxing game. Like, it was a stand-up game, and you threw strikes and bombs until you knocked somebody out. And the knockout rate was just way too high. There weren't nearly enough fighters that actually took the fight to the ground. This is just my opinion of 2010. Ground fighting was so negligible in 2010. It was almost like it was laughable. It was almost disgusting how negligible ground fighting was in 2010. But then now, 2 years later, you bring in Undisputed 3, and you have fight AI that takes the fight to the ground. True mixed martial art fight AI, and I'm so happy. I've watched so many sim fights on every different difficulty, and just the fight AI is so much better. There's way too many reversals on the ground. A lot of the time it devolves to like ultimate cat fighting, but that's only really on the higher difficulty settings, like expert and ultimate. You can't even grapple on the ground. It's just ridiculous. It's just reversals all the time. And this is computer AI versus computer AI. This is not me playing it at all. It just like I say, it devolves to ultimate cat fighting sometimes, but all in all, the fight AI is so much better. The knockout rate in the fights are going down. I actually see fights go to decision. You actually see fights end in submissions, which you never saw simming. I know, and I simmed enough fights on 2010 to know that you never fucking saw a submission, ever. But I'm seeing a lot more submissions watching sim fights on Undisputed 3, which is a big up to the development team there. Sub-positions on the ground. This is maybe a minor thing here, but it goes along with really improving the ground game in Undisputed 3. The fact that, anybody who either trains wrestling or jiu-jitsu or whatever knows that, like, side controls is not just side control. Like, you have sub positions in these ground positions, either full guard or half guard or side control or north-south or the mount, that you have sub positions in this where you're postured up and you can do more damage from these positions. And the fact that they integrated that into the ground game in Undisputed 3, marvelous. The ground game is so much better than it was in 2010. And along with that, just like I say, it ties into the whole AI thing again. It's just the AI is just so much better. Pride mode. Awesome. Just the inclusion of Pride, and going with that, the depth of the roster. I think it's up to like 150 fighters, not taking into account downloadable content, but so you have a roster of 150, including the bantamweight and featherweight divisions, Pride era fighters that maybe hardcore fight fans had even forgotten about, or wouldn't have expected to maybe see there. Just phenomenal. The inclusion of Pride mode, fights under Pride rules, Stephen Quattros, the fight professor, and Boss Rutan on commentary. Awesome, because I get sick of Mike Goldberg. I really do. Joe Rogan, not so much, but man, do I ever get sick of Mike Goldberg. So, swapping over to Pride fights and listening to Stephen Quattros and fucking Boss Rutan, and Boss is hilarious in this game. Although one thing I do need to share with you, and keep it away from Dana White, Boss Rutan mentions Fedor Emelianenko in a UFC game. On his commentary, it was when someone was attempting a slam or suplex. Oh no, it was a belly-to-belly suplex, and it was countered, and they ended up being mounted by their opponent. And Boss makes reference to a Fedor fight. Fedor and Hongman Choi, when that happened to Fedor. Hongman Choi ended up on top of him. And it was just, oh my god, it was so awesome. I lost it. Just the fact that Fedor Emelianenko was mentioned in a UFC game. It was amazing. I guess that's about it. Just like the biggest thing for me was how much the fight AI has improved, and how, not every fight is... I mean, I love a good knockout. Don't get me wrong. I really love knockouts. But when every fight ends in, like, the same, like, wonky video game knockout, it's just... It becomes... I mean, I might as well have bought Fight Night, right? Like, there was no point to buying an MMA, a mixed martial arts game, when it all just ended up sort of being about the stand-up. So, much improved, really all around. Undisputed 3, much improved from 2010. If you want me to put a rating on it, right now, my rating's going to be pretty high. It's going to be in the 8 territory. 8 out of 10, 8.5, probably 8.5. I'll settle on 8.5. Or, if you prefer, a 4 point, whatever that is, 4.25 out of 5, or whatever. There's so much about the game that I really enjoyed. I'm probably missing a bunch of things. That's everything that I could come up with when I was thinking about it. UFC Undisputed 3, if you haven't played it yet, please pick it up. It's, to date, probably the best MMA game since probably the Pride game on PS2. I loved that was an awesome game. That Pride game on PS2 was great. But it's definitely the best MMA game on the market right now. I've been playing it constantly since I got it. I have the Contenders pack, so I've got Alistair Overeem, so I've got as many fighters as you could possibly have before UFC puts out more content, which I can't wait for them to do, because there's a lot of fighters that are fighting in the UFC now that I like, that I wish were in the game. But that will, of course, come with time. Really enjoyed the game. THQ and Ukes and UFC knocked this one out of the park. My complaints are relatively negligible, even though they're there, and I think they're valid. But there's a lot to love about this game for the beginning MMA fan, or for the hardcore MMA fan. 8.5 out of 10. I'm Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Thank you so much. Happy to be back home. I won't be leaving you again. I don't want to be one of these vloggers that puts out a couple of videos and then fucks off for a couple of months. That's not who I am. So, very happy to be back, and thank you so much for watching. I got a bunch of videos coming up in the next little while. See you later.